When the hurricane hit New Orleans and the towns sank under the waves, was that a natural disaster? The Dutch prepared their dikes for the worst storm in 10,000 years. Had New Orleans followed that example, no tragedy would have occurred. A hurricane is an act of God, but a failure to prepare, when the necessity for preparation is well known, that's sin. That's failure to hit the mark. And the wages of sin are death. Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. Are you ready for another episode of Bitcoin Talk Show? I was just reading from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Kind of a controversial book right now. Of course, Jordan Peterson's a controversial figure. But the part I really got wrapped up in was he says, clean up your house before you go out into the world and lecture people. And I thought, but I do that all the time on Bitcoin Talk Show. I do nothing but talk and talk and talk. I really have to clean up this house. So I went at it. I sorted all my books. I started go through all my scrapbooks, all my little pieces of paper that I'm saving for someday or maybe, or someday I'll do this with this and do this with my cables and my cords. And I got all my electronic stuff into one section. And I think I got really close. I'm not going to say my house is perfect or perfectly in order, but it's time for Bitcoin Talk Show. So let's see what's going on in Bitcoin today. I wanted to first show you I got an exciting package in the mail. Want to open it live on the air. I don't get a lot of packages. This one was DHL, very important. They called me on the phone. They emailed me, all these things. And that's because I got a new Trezor Model T. Pretty cool. It says it takes Bitcoin, Dash, Ethereum, Litecoin, NEM, Zcash, authentication, shell, encryption, and more. I haven't heard of those last three. They must be new cryptocurrencies that we can get. Authentication currency sounds like a winner. But this is very cool. Thanks so much to Trezor for sending this to me. I was planned to review this as part of the deal that they sent it to me. But if it's good or bad, I'll let you know. Of course, I think it's going to be good. Trezor's a really good company. I really appreciate and enjoy my old Trezor, and I hope to enjoy my new one soon. But I don't want to set up the key and such live on the air. That just seems fraught with disaster. But once I get it set up, I'll talk to you again about it. Maybe we'll go through the menus and take a look at the screens, as well as I was thinking I could just have the donation sent to this thing. So whatever these coins are, maybe we'll accept just because they're easy and they're on the Trezor. But we're here for more than just looking at Trezor boxes. What colors can you get the Model T in? Oh, you know that one. You can have any color you like as long as it's black. Henry Ford, of course. And we're on Bitcoin Talk Show. We're looking at the price of Bitcoin, which was down 2.17% in the last 24 hours, with a last of 66.30, with a high of 68.47 and a low of 65.31. That's $1 for 15,096 Satoshis. It wasn't too long ago that we were down at the 5,000 Satoshi barrier. Oh, how times have changed so quickly. One of the other things besides the Trezor that I wanted to talk about today is that sex marketplace Backpage.com was seized by U.S. authorities, claiming that the website was involved in human trafficking, i.e., slavery, transporting people beyond lines, as well as child pornography. Bad. Backpage.com was seized by U.S. justice authorities. What does this have to do with Bitcoin? Not sure if many of you recall, but there was a point in Backpage's history where they were banned by Visa and MasterCard. They had no choice but to turn to Bitcoin. And pretty soon it was a pretty popular job in some cities to be teaching adult entertainment professionals how to use Bitcoin so that they could post their ads on Backpage. For you, those of you who don't know, we're playing whack-a-mole, and it started out that you could look for sex on Craigslist. Then they closed that down. Then you could look for sex on Backpage, and now they've closed that down. So it's only a matter of time before a new website pops up, maybe something like the Silk Road. But who wants to go to all the trouble of putting on Tor, the Onion browser? That's too much work. Greg Maxwell commented in 2004 in a thread about Hal Finney's remote proof of work digital cash prototype, which was a Bitcoin predecessor. He reflected back on this involvement in a 2013 thread. This was an interesting thread that I saw on Twitter from Tura de Meester, highlighting Greg Maxwell thinking about Hal Finney. And it's really neat to go back and think that all these people were involved on the cryptocurrency mailing list, and they were all talking about their ideas for a cryptocurrency. As Greg says here, prior to 2013, it was far from clear that governments weren't going to try to prosecute Bitcoin developers. Thus, most prudent people kept a low profile. So he's just talking about Mike Hearn and his entry into the Bitcoin space, and just some of the things Mike Hearn's saying are not matching up with reality. So Greg is calling it out. He's saying that major contributors weren't here or more or less doing the bulk of the work at the same time. And then to go back, Greg was volunteering and working on Hal Finney's project, seeing if there's a way to do it and how to get it to work. And it's interesting because everyone thinks about Hal Finney and that he might be Satoshi. But remember, part of the Satoshi thing is it's multiple hats and all these different things, is that Hal was trying to get Greg Maxwell to do GUI programming. He was trying to get him to create the graphical interface for the project they're working on. As you can see, Greg says, I'll do a lot of things, but GUI programming, yuck. So interesting to see these little stories about some of the early cryptographers and people who helped create the ideas behind Bitcoin, if not the actual Bitcoin itself. I thought this was an interesting meme that I saw. These guys are arguing. They always argue. That's what they do. A decentralized distributed ledger has advantages over a centralized database for securities tokens. No, it doesn't. You already rely on a trusted third party. But respectfully, the trust of the issuer isn't the main problem this solves. Trust isn't a challenge with issuers, but untrusted third parties. He's getting ready to throw a chair at him. It's more about the elimination of complex networks of obsolete intermediaries in today's capital markets. And he says, I would humbly suggest that decentralized systems can improve efficiency. And it was just great to see the kind of arguments that we have overlaid over the kind of arguments that other people have. Lightning Labs. We are back to a Bitcoin, not blockchain world. And I agree, this can't happen fast enough. Having a blockchain without a public tool or a public share of value, such as the Bitcoin, to reward your miners for mining your public blockchain, really means that you just have a permissioned or a private blockchain. And that's just like the intranets of the 90s. You can have them, but the internet always turns out better. It's interesting the way that always seems to work. And then also yesterday, on this day, April 5th, in 1933, the United States of America, a free country, made holding inert metal, gold, illegal with jail penalties, a massive attack on monetary sovereignty. Also on this day in 1975, Satoshi Nakamoto was born. The pendulum always swings to find balance. And it's interesting to remind people that, yes, in 1933, while we were on our way to World War II, FDR, in an attempt to reverse the Depression, did seize all of the American people's gold. They were given some money, I believe, for exchange of the gold, but they went house to house, door to door. Do you have any gold? Give up your gold. And it wasn't until the 70s when I think it was Anthem Blanchard, who's also related to Anthem Hayek, who's working with the Hayek Gold Project and some interesting stuff over there, complained to Richard Nixon. And I think he hired a skywriter, and he really went out of his way to say, why can't the American people own gold? And that's when it was allowed again in the 70s. Interesting, also around the time that America went off of the gold standard. So you could no longer trade your $20 for $20 in gold. But an interesting note that Satoshi chose this day to be his birthday. As we know with Satoshi, nothing is left to chance. Everything seems to be organized and planned, and choosing this birthday was no doubt the same. And finally, India bans banks from processing cryptocurrency purchases. This may have affected the Bitcoin market a couple of days ago, caused a brief depression as once again, India and China go through the various stages of Bitcoin. Remember, in the stages of Bitcoin, first you can't believe it, then you can, then you try to ban it, Then you realize that the ban didn't work, and eventually you come around to acceptance. But they are far from that. But I'm just going to go ahead and get on my headphones here, start up the Skype application. So you can go ahead and call us right now on Skype, World Crypto Network, all one word. And if there's some people to talk to, we'll talk. If not, we might move on. We'll see what the chat is talking about as Skype is loading. We are at SKYPE World Crypto Network, all one word. And what's going on in the chat? They say, it's only controversial because he's a teacher. People don't want to get learned. And did I read about George Soros? Not surprisingly, he's trying to crash crypto. I did read an article about George Soros today saying that he was going to start trading cryptocurrencies, which I thought was very interesting because in the past he'd been a big opponent of cryptocurrencies. Part of this, from the example that he raised, I can see his point. I believe the exact Soros quote is something like, if there's a currency like Bitcoin, all of our dictatorship models in the future are going to change because the dictators will use Bitcoin to smuggle out the money and to take the people's wealth with them. So in that way, I can see what he's saying. It certainly is unfortunate that the world will always have something like Bitcoin to store their wealth in, and that these dictators will have other options. I don't know if you recall when they broke into the recent, I think he was the president of Ukraine. He was living in a very lavish palace. And the people kind of let themselves in and walked around the palace and just marveled at what these people had been getting away with while they struggled and starved. So maybe in the future, though, it won't be a lavish palace. It'll be a lavish treasure wallet. Um, hidden perhaps in someone's body, sneaking its way outside of the country, or brain wallet, just some codes written down somewhere. It's interesting to see what the future of dictatorships might be. So I understand Soros's complaint there, but I do think it's probably a good thing to see him come around to cryptocurrency and to change his mind. I mean, Warren Buffett is still out there. He's quite an older gentleman now, though, so it might be too late for him. But there is a hope. Oh, continue. Get the latest update to continue using Skype. That sounds like a threat. But what do you guys think of Soros? Tell me in the chat. I know there's a lot of negativity about Soros. He's seen as a left-wing conspiracy figure. I read another article, not really about Soros, but it was about democracy in Hungary. And it doesn't look so good for Hungary and Poland. They've had quite an influx of right-wing movements there. And in Hungary specifically, George Soros is publicly seen as a figure of the left and an enemy of the people because he's tried several pro-democracy movements in that area. But that's why the people don't like him. That's the left-right disagreement there. So, but we can talk about that. Let's see. Everyone says Bitcoin crashing on the moon, maybe. It's been tough to see the price of Bitcoin go down, no doubt. A lot of people have lost money. But if you just hold, you have the same amount of Bitcoin that you had before. We get back to Bitcoin wisdom here, so we can see more of a live chart. Tell us all about the Bitcoin private transaction advancement. Well, I'm not sure what that means. That might mean Bitcoin private, which is an altcoin that I've heard about, and I don't know much more than that it's an altcoin. There's also the idea that confidential transactions would be added to Bitcoin. That's the idea that it matters how much money you're sending. If you're sending, $1 million, there's only a certain group of Bitcoiners who actually have $1 million, and now I've just reduced the number of people who could be sending that money. So I do think confidential transactions will be added to Bitcoin, and that will be very cool. As far as the rest of the changing Bitcoin from pseudo-anonymous to anonymous, it's going to take more than that. We did see recently that Chainalysis, the firm that analyzes Bitcoin and other accounts, recently raised, I think, $12 million. So they are on their way. And it's very clear that you can certainly monitor the blockchain, that it's very monitorable. And it's part of the beauty and part of the problem of it. So trying to log into Skype here. They do that nice thing for the new version. They make you log out. Let's see. I also like it the way programs are starting to clear the clipboard. When you log in, that makes it much harder to log in. I like that. Yeah, it looks like Microsoft's not letting me paste into the password field. That also makes it harder to log in. Okay, survey says, did I type my password correctly? Oh, all right. So now we are on the new version of Skype, if that makes a difference. And you can call us on Skype. Let's see. We've got some different views and opinions in the chat. Dry Dessert says Soros will crush us all like insects. Chris Wick says Trump is the enemy. So there is a difference of opinion there. S. Mert thinks that Trump is king, and Bud Thompson thinks Soros is evolving into a James Bond villain. It is very interesting. I would say there is more than one person in the world right now who seems like a James Bond villain. The kid from Facebook obviously reminds me of the kid who played him in the movie, Jesse Eisenberg, who played him unintentionally played him in the Batman versus Superman film. He was Lex Luthor, very evil, and it very much seemed like the guy from Facebook had suddenly become Lex Luthor. I don't know whether that's just I see him in the same role or he didn't change his acting much. But I would say, yeah, he's very powerful. Elon Musk has a little bit of it with the Martian thing. A lot of people, we talked about an article a few months ago where if Soros goes, or if Elon Musk goes to Mars, he'll pretty much be the king of Mars. If you work there and you want more bread or more air or something like that, you'd have to go through Elon. And if he wants to give you less, it's very hard to know who you'd be able to negotiate with when you're in a little airlock on Mars, working essentially as an indentured servant. So it could bring back a lot of the old world ideas. So that's interesting to see. Am I going to be at Consensus? Probably not. Will I be in Denver on the 25th? Probably yes. I don't know very much about the Denver event. I think a lot of people are going to speak up on the stage. Oh, we got a call, so hold on a sec. Hello, caller. You're live on the World Crypto Network. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Gabriel Vincent Moon from Phoenix, Arizona. What's going on?
It's going good, man. So what's on your mind about Bitcoin?
Well, I saw someone, he wanted to talk about privacy in terms of Bitcoin transactions in the chat.
Sure.
So, well, that's probably going to be the next big debate in Bitcoin, probably, because now we have, or the core developers decided that SegWit was the way to go with second layer solutions as far as solving the scaling problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking that maybe privacy isn't necessarily like the biggest concern for Bitcoin, and maybe it should like remain a public blockchain. What do you think about that?
Well, it definitely should be public, and people should be able to mine it. Now, whether it should be a public, like in the clear, like we used to send our passwords around in plain text all the time, and now we send them around encrypted all the time. That's a choice that happened, and it's been good for everyone, but the end user doesn't really see the difference. So I think if it should change in a way where, as difficult as it may be, that it's somehow backwards compatible, and that the end user wouldn't see a difference. You're just all of a sudden using Bitcoin private now, or Bitcoin privately, or whatever we're going to call it. And but yeah, I don't know how it would be done. I think that you're right that if they went to a layer 2 solution for scaling, might they not go to a layer 2 solution for privacy? Just roll up a side chain, give it a try, see if it works. I think it would have that problem where, if you're only mixing your transactions with criminals, you still have a dirty transaction on the other end, because that's a problem. But otherwise, I think if there's changes that need to be made, it's clear that it's going to be very difficult to convince the core developers to change anything. So it needs to be changed in a sandbox, right?
Concern of the core developers that they don't want to change any of the consensus code because they don't want to risk a chain split. They would prefer that everything be on the same chain. So with stuff like Lightning, that does give you slightly more privacy. And so I could see them adding some more layer 2 solutions like that. But as far as changing like the public nature of the addresses and such, I think that's going to be much more difficult. And also, I don't think Bitcoin necessarily needs to compete with all of these different privacy coins. Like if you're trying to compete with an implementation of Mimblewimble, which has not even any addresses, well, how is Bitcoin going to be private than something that has no addresses, you know?
That is true. You can't be all things to all people, and you end up losing focus, right?
Yeah, so I just think that's an interesting topic that people haven't really talked about yet or really considered, because I know the libertarians and the crypto anarchists, they would prefer like everything to be anonymous and private, but it just didn't happen that way with Bitcoin. It needed to be a public blockchain so that all of the nodes could validate their transactions with each other. So I just think that's something interesting that hasn't been discussed too much yet.
I do agree, and I think it was easier to build it in public first. That would have been much more complicated, like building a black box inside of a black box, and you just can't see anything that's happening. So I think it's exciting what we have, but I do think that we're going to continue to see governments cracking down on it from the edges where they can crack down on it, where the money goes in and out of the system. But in the actual core of the Bitcoin, I continue to not see any problems. You can send value around. It's relatively cheap. It's relatively fast. Eventually, with the Lightning Network, you could even send microtransactions. Is the long-awaited dream of the internet. So I think everything's going forward. It all looks good. We're just having that typical crazy price decline. So.
Yeah, no, the Bitcoin is still fundamentally strong, I think. But yeah, I just wanted to pop in and say that. So,
well, cool. Thanks so much for the call. And give us a call anytime. And if you'd like to give us a call, you can Skype us right now at World Crypto Network, all one word on Skype. I might have to add you as a friend first, so go ahead and add me as a friend, and I'll add you in. And if not, we're talking about privacy coins and if Bitcoin really needs it and how quickly it needs it. Looks like we're also talking politics in the chat. There is some concern about Putin and Trump. I'm certainly concerned about that. But then there's another group of people that are not concerned and think that that's all overblown. So it's fair to have an opinion on both sides. We just got to keep researching it till we find information or evidence that either confirms or disconfirms our opinions. So they're saying that the nice side of layer 2 is avoiding hard forks. I agree with that. I think there's a lot more testing that can be done on Bitcoin now that you can roll out something like a liquid sidechain or like Lightning Network or even a copy of the Lightning Network or something like that. And once again, you don't really need anyone's permission. You're not affecting the rest of the network or the chain, such as other projects which actually did affect the network, where they were storing large amounts of data in the blockchain. And people quickly caught on to this and said, we can't allow this. And they even changed the blockchain a little bit. It's saying layer 2 solutions on cross-chain swap with Monero and Zcash. I do think that cross-atomic swaps could be part of the privacy solution, and that I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not impossible that something like Monero or Zcash or another privacy coin that hasn't been invented yet would be involved in the Bitcoin privacy solution. But I do think eventually, to solve the problem of having a bunch of good addresses to use, you're going to want it adopted on the main net. You're going to want privacy enabled on every transaction, and the user doesn't have to do anything different. That's your ideal privacy solution. Whether we'll get to that, I don't know. And then on top of that, if they'll find a way to break that or bug that or trap that, that's the eternal cat and mouse game about privacy. But now that we're having this discussion, I do think we're getting closer to it. Before, it was very hard to even have this discussion. People, until recently, I think, still believed in Facebook. They believed that you could trust them with all of your personal information and everything would be just fine. I'd warned against Facebook from the beginning. I saw something like this might happen, and now that it's happened, and to see them and their culture try to react and their style try to react, and everything that they've done needs to be different now. There's a show today, I don't think I'm going to catch it, but they had the Apple CEO on, and Apple made a lot of different choices about privacy compared to Facebook and some of the other networks. Google, for example, which Gmail famously read your email to create its advertisements, whereas Apple said, no, we're just going to silo the users into little boxes and encrypt them so even we can't get access to them. And it's starting to look like Apple's privacy first solution might be the superior solution. And that Facebook and these other situations where they've just allowed way too much access to their data to the point where you don't even know what's going on with your data. You got sold to this analytics company, you had no idea. I think that's a big problem. So it's good to see people paying attention to things that previously were not thought of as problems. But I've always thought was a problem. I always thought that all the messages on Facebook should be encrypted and that your friends should have like friend of friend keys so that they could read them. And then the administrators of Facebook couldn't even read the message if they weren't in the friend of friend stream. And sure, it's possible they could have some trick against that, but you get the basic idea. Everything should be encrypted. Let's see what else is going on in the chat. Will Bitcoin hit 10K again this year? Well, you'd have to take out one of those charts and you'd have to draw triangles on it. I think that if you zoom out the current chart as far as it'll go, you can see there is potentially still a upward line through the middle of all this. But the red line here is starting to dip through that upward line. So what do the good chart makers do when the chart dips past your line? You draw a new line below it. So I think we keep drawing new lines and we keep going kind of sideways and hopefully back up. But let's keep going. They're having a debate about whether Trump is a company man. We don't know. Or he says, oh, and he said company man. He says he ain't no commie man. So differences of appearance on Trump in the chat. When will Tron be worth $1? I don't know. I think it already went up a lot. It's very difficult. Remember, a lot of these things are pumping on the hype. So they had their one hype pump, and then now you're hoping there's a second hype pump. And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. So let's see. Someone's trying to connect with us here. Remember, you can Skype us at World Crypto Network, all one word on Skype. People say Tron is a scam in the chat. Might be. Mueller has 18 indictments leading to Trump. Ex-Marine Mueller is going to snare Trump, it says in the chat. I do think there's also an event on the stock market today. It was down more than 700 points, 4% at one point, mainly because of the tariffs and the potential trade war. This trade war thing, I hate to side with the mainstream media, but pretty much everybody said trade is good. And when you start raising tariffs on one side, they raise tariffs on the other side. We go back and forth, and now we're in a trade war. Hopefully it could be averted. Oh, we do have a call. Hold on just a sec. Hello, caller. You're live on the World Crypto Network. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Mustafa. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. How's it going, Thomas?
It's going good. Welcome back, Mustafa. How are things going? What's on your mind about Bitcoin?
Well, Bitcoin itself is on my mind. I know a lot of people freaking out about the price dip or decline, slow decline to the eventual zero is what everyone's thinking. But, I'm pretty excited, man. Pretty excited about all the technology that's advancing every day. So
it is tough to keep both ideas in your mind, that the technology sounds so good. The Lightning guys got funding. Everything seems like it's on track. They had the 7 days of Lightning apps from Blockstream. That was very interesting. And yeah, but all of that does nothing for the price, right?
Right. I mean, and honestly, the fact that the price is going down, it shouldn't make anybody of us sad. We should be happy that we're having the opportunity to get all this, all these cheap Bitcoin, buy it all up as much as you can. Can you imagine if it would have stayed at 20,000 or it went up, kept going up like it was, the end of last year? You'd be buying fractions of it today with a couple $100 every week or every month or however much you can afford. But if you think about it, this is perfect. It's perfect for us people that know the information, that are up with the technology and like all the news.
Well, sure, and everyone called for the dip, and everyone always wants a dip. I always hear when it's going crazy up, everyone's always like, "Oh, why won't it dip so I can get some?" But when it really dips, it's so sharp and painful that I think it scares everyone off. And it seems really simple to say, but there's that saying where you should be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. But I think it's easier to say than to do.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Because, I and everybody I know didn't sell a dollar worth of Bitcoin when it was almost $20,000, just because everybody wanted to just keep buying more, and nowadays, like you said, yeah, most people don't, most people are scared to buy it, and they're like, oh, I'm losing money.
Well, I think you gotta have 2 strategies for that. If you do have a good job and you're in a good situation financially and you can afford to, save or invest a little bit of money in the Bitcoin, I think continuing with your dollar cost averaging, getting a couple $100 a week, especially setting it up to people are down on Coinbase, but they can let you set it up as a timer. I think, excuse me, that's really the best way because you don't know that it's going out, you don't think about it's going out, and you just need to keep that on and keep that going. So I think that's totally doable. What's bad though is I saw my friend, she was doing it where whenever the price would go down, she'd stop her timer so she wouldn't get any of the good buys. And then when it go back up, she'd let the timer go. And I was like,
Yeah, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it right there.
it
Yeah, you
was
gotta
frustrating.
forget it. But I tell people, whatever you can afford on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, even I prefer a daily. That way, it really is a dollar cost averaging on a daily basis, and and it's been working out for me and everybody else that is doing what I suggested.
Well, and then the other thing is just a longer horizon. A lot of people are like, "Oh, how did you make money in Bitcoin?" It was like, "Well, I bought a little bit 5 years ago." So it took me a long time before I had any money, and even then, it goes up and down so much. And I'm a new trader. I wasn't new. I wasn't a big stock trader or anything. So it goes down, you freak out. It goes up, you buy back in. You don't get all the runs up and down, and it's certainly not easy to hold your position for multiple years of the price going crazy. So,
Right. I mean, honestly, it depends. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to just double your money, and as soon as it doubles, you're gonna cash out and go. And if you're looking for that quick short term profit, I guess yeah, it wouldn't. What my suggestions or what you're suggesting as well is wouldn't work. But the way I look at it is,
oh, it says you're on hold for some reason. I don't know. Maybe he had to go. I didn't put him on hold. Oh, there you go.
hello?
Mustafa, are you still with us?
Yes, I
All
am.
right.
I'm still with you.
Cool.
Yeah, somebody's just calling in, I guess, on my phone here.
Busy.
But anyways, what I was saying is, I'm looking at Bitcoin kind of like a retirement, as a retirement fund, and eventually, once one Bitcoin is worth 100 times what it was when you first bought into it, that's when you can really say you can cash out, if you really want to. But hopefully by that time you won't need to, and you can just use your Bitcoin to live.
Well, and even then, all of these crazy ups are a lesson to us. I remember I felt the way you did when it went up to 1,200 and then it went back down. And I tell you, I didn't sell a single Satoshi. I watched it go up, I watched it go down, and then when it got back to the ground, I was like, "What happened? Why didn't I take some profit?" And it's hard because I go back and forth between being like, I have this amount of Bitcoins and I'll never get any more. And if I sell them, I'll never be able to get back to this amount. Or going like, I need money for this, I need money for that. You have to pay bills. So it is the next time it goes crazy up, we all need to take some kind of profit. You need to split your Bitcoin up into like hold forever, hold for a little while, and hold for a short term. And then at least you have some where you can say, hey, at least I bought a laptop or something while it was up, so you could feel good about that. So
That's not bad advice at all, man. That's not bad advice. I personally, as long as I don't absolutely need to liquidate a piece of Bitcoin, I'm not going to. unless it's a life or death situation, I guess you could say.
Oh yeah, well, and that's why a few years ago I told everyone they needed to get jobs, and that if you have a job, you should keep your job. And the job is allowing you to buy Bitcoin and not to have to worry. If you're out of a job and you're living on Bitcoin, you have to make sells every once in a while anyway. It can be a bit of a worry, and it can also be a bit of a bummer when you're selling so much more Bitcoin this month than you were last month. But you got to pay.
Right, exactly, and it's going to be more of a bummer later this year when you realize, you spent like $100,000 in a month. What it could have been worth if you would have held it.
It could go either way. So looks like we have another call coming in, but thanks so much for calling, Mustafa, and give us a call anytime.
For sure, man. I appreciate everything you guys do, man. Keep it up.
Thanks so much. And go ahead, other caller. I can see you trying to call. Let's see, maybe I'll try to give you a call. In the future, talk show calls you. Hello, caller. You're live on the World Crypto Network. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm Chaz. I'm calling from Canada.
Hi, Chaz. What's on your mind about Bitcoin today?
Well, I didn't want to talk about Bitcoin so much as I wanted to talk about the paper wallet maker.
Sure. Go ahead, Chaz.
Okay. Well, I knew you bought one back in, I think that was 14 or 15, something like that.
A long time ago, for sure.
Yeah. I bought one probably the month after you did. Have you done anything with it, or are you using it at all?
It's on a shelf somewhere. I have to find the power cord to plug it in, but I haven't really done much with it in a while.
Okay. I found that a USB power thing works on the Piper. So.
Oh, nice. Is it still working? I guess now the SegWit address it's not as valuable, right? It creates only the old-fashioned ones.
It does, but you can actually change it. I haven't been able to find out where to find the vanity, whatever it's called, that you need to change the code, but apparently you can change it. So,
well, that'd be pretty cool, because I recall you could plug a whole monitor and a keyboard and everything into that thing through USB.
Yes, you can. Yeah, monitor. You can even plug a USB hub and get all kinds of other peripherals. So.
We should also tell the people at home who haven't heard of the Piper wallet. Back in the day, the Piper is a little machine where you push the button on top and it does the random number generation, and it makes a Bitcoin wallet for you right there. It prints it right out. It has a little receipt printer like the things at the grocery store. And I got mine because I thought it'd be a really neat way to show people Bitcoin, and that if I have a little Skyhook Bitcoin ATM that also doesn't work so well anymore. And yeah, I was going to put them next to each other and let people try out Bitcoin, put a couple dollars on it. Not a big deal. But it was a fun little device. And obviously no one should put their life savings on a printed receipt paper. It fades quickly. But it was a fun idea. What did you do with yours? Did you just try it out, or?
I actually paired it up with a printer that has never been online and has had all of its connections disconnected. So what I've done is I've printed it up, the wallets, and laminated them in plastic.
Nice.
So along with the heat ticket. So what ends up happening is the keys are on the inside of the laminated plastic. There's no way to see them from the outside. You have to destroy the wallet in order to get at the key. So I've made dozens of these things. They're very popular up here.
Yeah, it sounds like a great way to spread the word about Bitcoin. I don't know if the Piper guy is still in business, or if he even still has his website. The last I'd heard, he was down in San Francisco. He was at 20 Mission for a while. It was kind of a co-working space. And then I heard that he was hired by 21. They're now earn.com. And that's when they were trying to do more hardware Bitcoin stuff, because he's obviously a hardware guy.
Yeah, I understand that. So, but yeah, I haven't heard anything else. I've been to the website several times, and I guess they're not selling the Pipers anymore. But
yeah, it was as cool as I thought it was. It was really more of like a garage project. Everything was kind of that way back then. Even Trezor and Ledger were very small companies. But yeah, it's too bad.
Make most secure wallets going.
It really was, and it was a great an example. It was a way to show people Bitcoin and print the wallet right there. And a lot of people forget that Bitcoin's really just public and private key cryptography. That what I learned when I ran PGP a million years ago, and I learned how to encrypt my email and all those kind of things, is basically the same thing you need to learn for Bitcoin. You have a private key that lets you sign messages, or in Bitcoin's case, send Bitcoin. And then you have a public key that lets you receive messages or receive money in Bitcoin's case. And that basic knowledge of public key cryptography is the beginning of all this. And I thought the Piper was a great way to show that.
Have you heard anything at all that would compromise its ability to generate the random keys? Or I haven't heard anything, but I'm wondering if you have.
As far as I know, it should be fine. It's similar to Bit Address, that website that randomly generates keys, which is how I used to do it with Tails. I would boot into Tails Linux, and then I would have a offline version of the Bit Address thing. If it was, I think it's different than, like, I know blockchain.info had a problem with their random number generator that they were using to create wallets, and it was quite a mess because that white hat hacker was able to go in and empty out all the wallets. Which he did, and he returned the money. It was an amazing story. Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything about the Piper. I'd also think if there was a problem, it would be too small. But then that's the worst thing, because if the problem's too small and you're the one that gets broken, it could cost you a lot. But as far as I know, they should still be secure. Lately, though, I do suggest more of a Trezor or a Ledger. These hardware wallets have gotten really good, and they also create the keys offline. So they don't ever touch a computer.
Yeah. There's been, there's an issue in people. They don't want to spend $100 or that much money on it. They want to buy $20 in Bitcoin. They don't want to have to buy $100 piece of technology to keep it.
That's fair. And for a lot of people, I think Coinbase or maybe Airbits or Edge Wallet on your phone is probably good enough for security for $20, especially what I like about Airbits, and I assume it's true for Edge, is you can just write down your username and password, and that can get you back in. The same kind of true for Coinbase. And these are selling points to new people, but they're also attack points for old people. But if you only have $20, and maybe if it goes up to 100 or if it goes up to 1,000, what I find is important to remind people is if your investment of $20 does go up to like 2,000 or 10,000, that's when it's a great time to buy a Ledger or a Trezor. Maybe you bought Ethereum or you bought some altcoin or some ICO and you really nailed it. If your investment changes, it's time to get a Ledger, a Trezor. It's time to get a safe deposit box. It's time to get a fireproof safe for your house. Whatever you feel comfortable with, you need to expand your security. And it's hard because people get wrapped up and they forget how much they've made or whatever, and they can't justify it. But you want to justify it. You want to keep that somewhere safe.
So as far as you know, the Piper is still safe to use and still a wonderful tool.
As far as I know, still safe to use, but we'll put the call out right here. If anybody knows about the Piper wallet, or you've hacked it, or you think it'd be fun to, let us know on Twitter @MadBitcoins. I'll definitely retweet it. If the creator of Piper's out there, and maybe you work at 21 or you work with that guy, shout out to him. A great product, a very fun thing, and maybe we could get a response out of him. But yeah, I would look around for him on Twitter. Honestly, I'd try to figure out his name if it's on the Piper thing, and try to bump the company a couple of times. Not that I think they need to release an update, but it would be cool if they just released a statement like you're saying, that as far as we know, it's still all good. It's an old product. We're not making it anymore, but respect to the people still running it. So.
Okay, well, thanks for your input, Thomas. I really appreciate the show.
Well, thanks so much for the call, Chaz. Call anytime.
Thanks again.
Thank you. And if you'd like to give us a call, you can call us right now on Skype at World Crypto Network, all one word. Just add me as a friend. I'll add you as a friend. You can install Skype for free. I think you have to create a username and a password. And of course, Skype's owned by Microsoft, like LinkedIn and everything else now. So maybe you already have an account and you don't even know it. So we're going to go back to the chat, see what's going on, and definitely check out the Piper paper wallet printer if you're interested in that. Very cool piece of hardware. And it was a neat idea to laminate the keys and keep them inside that way. What he's saying is that the receipt paper actually changes color to a black dark color with the heat of the plastic lamination, thus kind of encrypting your private key. You can only get it by opening up the lamination. Pretty cool idea. Let's see. They say a lava lamp is the best random number generator. I have heard that. I heard when they were doing a lot of the initial internet randomizations, they set up a big wall of lava lamps and then filmed them. And then the computer got its randomness from that. That's an interesting idea. It almost sounds like a cyberpunk or hacker movie. Speaking of hacker movies, I'll try not to do any spoilers, but you really should have read the book by now. But I saw the movie for Ready Player One. And while I didn't think it was as good as the book, it's still a fun movie. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride. You know, things kind of happen in order, but has a lot of cool stuff from the 80s and old video games and old characters from movies and so forth. It was a fun ride, but it did remind me of Snow Crash, which is supposed to be coming out on Amazon soon. Excited for that. It's supposed to be a series based on the classic book. And again, that the world needs a movie about Neuromancer. William Gibson's work after Johnny Mnemonic failed and fizzled badly. Again, it was only a short story. It's not his fault. Hasn't seemed to have been adapted to the screen. I don't know if he doesn't want it adapted or if he's made deals and those deals have gotten stuck, as Hollywood is apt to do. But with this Ready Player One, with probably the success of Snow Crash, Neuromancer movie, I'd love to see it. Of course, it's tough because a lot of his books were stolen by The Matrix. So you're going to see Neuromancer the movie and you're going to say, gosh, that's a ripoff of The Matrix. But of course, he was first. I would like to see Neuromancer the movie in gritty black and white with a few color elements, kind of like Schindler's List. Maybe a green, grainy Matrix tone to it, like The Matrix had when you were in The Matrix. And then, of course, when he enters into the world of cyberspace, that's when I think you'd start to see color. Very small directing note there, but that would be my preference for the film. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Not a lot happening. Talking about Litecoin. Hot wallet is good enough for $10 to $1,000, but when you get above that, it's time to get yourself some security. And yeah, I think we're pretty much on agreement. Everybody likes hardware wallets like Trezor and Ledger. It works in a complicated way that you don't have to understand, but basically the key is generated in the device and the key never leaves the device. So even when you connect it with USB, it's only making partial connection. It's not letting them into the key. The signing is all done on the device. It sounds really complicated probably for new people. But let's just assume it's magic and it works and it's amazing. The problem with a wallet that you would generate, like if you went to bitaddress.com or whatever right now and just generated it, is that if someone is watching your computer, they're watching your address, and they might even wait till you put money on it before they let you know by stealing it. So that would be bad if someone's watching your computer. Other people can get into your wallets and things. They could look at your history on your computer if it was there. It's better to create the key offline. Previously, I have some videos where I describe how to do this with Tails Linux. I haven't done it in a long time. My laptop doesn't have an optical or DVD drive anymore. So I guess I'd have to download Tails, put it on a USB stick, boot to the USB stick, have a separate USB stick with the bit address program, load that up in Tails, and then I could generate the private key. And if that seems all hackery and too much work for you, spend the $100, get the Trezor or the Ledger. Remember, don't go cheap on your Trezor or your Ledger. Don't get it from eBay. It's very easy for someone to have, well, it's not very easy, but it's very possible for someone to have opened up your Trezor, written down the key already, taken things like that. You don't want that. It could be a fake Trezor that's really just a honeypot trying to steal your money. Buy it from a respectable source directly from Trezor or Ledger. Also recommend cryptohwwallet.com. He was our sponsor on our Prague trip. It's very cool. Actually got to meet Slush from Slushpool, who makes these Trezor wallets. Early Bitcoin entrepreneur, very cool guy. So yeah, the Trezor, the ledger is the way to go. The security level beyond that is we suggest that people get a safe deposit box. Banks are really good at physical security. We've been doing that for hundreds of years. No one is good at computer security. So if you put your keys on your Trezor or your ledger, you put your Bitcoin and your other things on there. And then if you put the original recovery seed in a safe deposit box, then it's totally safe. No one can get to it. And you can use your Trezor or ledger with the password and everything on it. And this way, if you lose your password or your Trezor ledger stops working, you can go get that private key. Sorry, someone's trying to impress people with their motorcycle outside. But yeah, that's the best security we suggest. The other security options come with things like splitting up your private key into multiple parts, having multiple signatures on your private key so that it could only be accessed. Say if your wife also had a key and your mother had a key, you need 2 out of the 3. So your wife would have to collaborate with your mother to steal your money. And maybe that's unlikely. Maybe that's likely. But there's a lot of different ways you can secure your money. People saying an Android phone might be the least safe device to use as a cold wallet. There are so many ways to steal and transmit your wallet DAT file. I would say yes. There's a bit of a worry with Android as opposed to Apple. Apple has more of a closed, walled garden for their app store. They're very tight on what kind of apps get in there, whereas the Android store was more any app can get in there. And I imagine you can probably run code from websites and other things like that as well. So if the code comes from anywhere, it's more likely to include something that would steal your wallet. So in this case, Apple's walled garden, which a lot of power users complain about, is actually an additional level of protection that you get by being an Apple user or by being a noob, as people might call it. But again, we're talking about less than $1,000. Don't put more than that on your phone. Your phone is more like your spending wallet. If you found somewhere that takes Bitcoin, or if you want to buy some drinks or something like that, that's good money to have on your phone. Let's see. We're talking about institutional money in the chat. People are screaming for it. That may be what the Soros story was about. He was saying he's a large trader and he's going to start trading Bitcoin as much as people don't like him politically, or it goes both ways. There's also been theories that a lot of these large buys that we've seen at the bottom of each one of our dips here has been someone like the Bank of Japan, someone that's buying and waiting, buying and waiting, buying and waiting. At a certain point, there is a belief in the Bitcoin community that the banks will have to start buying Bitcoin, even if it's as a hedge, right? They don't believe in Bitcoin. They don't think it's going to work, but they think there's a possibility. And if there's a possibility, they have to be prepared for that possibility. That could be enough, but we don't know. Okay, there's a question in the chat. Will a Trezor work with a Chromebook? I personally haven't tried it. I don't see why it wouldn't. Right now, the Trezor, to my knowledge, works with a Chrome extension. So you have to run Chrome, the browser. The Chrome extension comes up. You plug the Trezor in. You put your password in. It accesses the device. I do think they're working on a standalone program. I don't know if they've completed it yet. And I do think, just off the top of my head, that the Chrome extension would work on the Chromebook. I might try that. Maybe I'll try that on my new one. The thing is, the funny thing about a Trezor or Ledger is, even if you're a competent computer person, you don't really want to mess with it that much. Once you get your money on there, you just want to put it on a shelf and put it in your safe and not really mess with it. So I haven't really messed with mine as much as I've messed with my other computer stuff. So now that I got this blank one right here from Trezor, the new one to try out, thank you, Trezor. I'll try that. I'll try it on a Chromebook as soon as I get it set up. That'll be one of it, because I've got a Chromebook around here. I do like Chromebooks. I think it's pretty fun. I got it as a light computer. I don't use it as much as I should, though. Have trouble keeping all these different laptops and things charged. Just a reminder, you can call us at World Crypto Network, all one word, on Skype. It's 3:46 p.m. We'll try to see if we can keep this going until 4 o'clock. Otherwise, if we don't receive any calls, we might be getting towards the end. Main story today, just wanted to go over is I think it's a big deal that the sex marketplace Backpage.com was seized by the U.S. Justice authorities. I thought that was a hot story. And I also wanted to talk about the Trezor Model T and thank the good people at Trezor for sending it to me and that I will review it soon. Let's see. Thoughts about Monex. Don't know what Monex is. A lot of these altcoins, there's just so many. This guy says girlfriends are the best random number generator. They can generate them. And let's see, not much else happening in the chat. So let's see, maybe read some Jordan Peterson and then we'll be out here. A lot of people are down on Jordan Peterson. They say he's a conservative and that should devalue all of his advice. I think his advice is interesting, even if he is a conservative. We may not agree on everything, but he's an interesting guy. And what I liked about his books is that normally when I read a biblical example, they're just going to the biblical example for strength, whereas he actually broke down the biblical example into an actual reason why the people would do that. I say it a lot, but the idea that pork would be unclean, so you would teach people not to eat it by saying that God doesn't want you to eat pork, but really you just want your community not to get sick. You want your people to be prosperous, so you're trying to teach them good habits, and at that time, good habits. Will the Model T be available again soon? If they've sold out, I imagine they'll be putting new ones in stock. I was very lucky to get this review one. Like I said, they had to DHL it straight to me from Prague. It was funny to see its path across Europe. I've been there now, so it's kind of fun to think about it myself. Yeah, definitely clean your room. I do think that's important. Bulletproofs. Bulletproofs are really complicated. I'd have to read the article just to be fresh about it. It's basically, it works into that whole confidential transactions thing, and it's going to be really great. I'd have to read it up again. But let me read you this from Rule 7. He's talking about Socrates. He says, Socrates first answered that he had been preparing his whole life to defend himself, but then said something more mysterious and significant. When he attempted specifically to consider strategies that would produce acquittal by fair means or foul, or even when he merely considered his potential actions at the trial, he found himself interrupted by his divine sign, his internal spirit, voice, or daemon. Socrates discussed this voice at the trial itself. He said that one of the factors distinguishing him from other men was his absolute willingness to listen to its warnings, to stop speaking and cease acting when it objected. The gods themselves had deemed him wise above other men, not least for this reason, according to the Delphic oracle herself, held to be a reliable judge of such things. Because his ever reliable internal voice objected to fleeing or even to defending himself, Socrates radically altered his view of the significance of the trial. He began to consider that it might be a blessing rather than a curse. He told Hermogenes of his realization that the spirit to whom he had always listened might be offering him a way out of life in a manner easiest, but also the least irksome to one's friends, with sound body and a spirit capable of showing kindliness and absent the throes of illness and vexations of extreme old age. Socrates' decision to accept his fate allowed him to put away moral terror in the face of death itself, prior to and during the trial, and after the sentence was handed down, even later, during his execution. He saw that his life had been so rich and full that he could let it go gracefully. He was given the opportunity to put his affairs in order. He saw that he could escape the terrible, slow degeneration of the advancing years. He came to understand that all that was happening to him was a gift from the gods. He was not therefore required to defend himself against his accusers, at least not with the aim of pronouncing his innocence and escaping his fate. Instead, he turned the tables, addressing his judges in a manner that makes the reader understand precisely why the town council wanted this man dead. Then he took his poison like a man. And it reminds me a lot of, I forget the Camus, I think it was, who said, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. We must imagine that the work itself, pushing the rock up the hill and having it fall back down, that he's not dismayed or discouraged, that he just starts again. It's time to push the rock back up the hill. And that's just something to think about. Socrates, Sisyphus, turning the tables and not allowing even the price to get you down. So thanks so much for watching the Bitcoin Talk Show. We'll be back again soon, maybe with another episode of Bitcoin Talk Show or Today in Bitcoin. Sounds like no Vortex this weekend, so the Bitcoin News Show on Sunday. Maybe we'll try to do something on that day to fill in the time and keep things going. As always, please subscribe to the World Crypto Network down below. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Thumbs up are free, and they help more people find the show. And if you're looking for some audio podcasts, we've got audio podcasts at theworldcryptonetwork.com. You can subscribe on iTunes or Acast. And we've got much more than just the World Crypto Network. We've got Tone Vase, and Adam Meester, and Jimmy Song, and much, much more. Ansel, and so much more. So check that out on the World Crypto Network. And if you got extra Bitcoin, even in this downtime, you'd like to donate, you could scan the QR code on your screen. Also, a shout out to my Patreons. If you'd like to subscribe monthly with credit card, pay what you want, $10 a month, $5 a month. Thanks so much to all my patrons for their support. I get about $500 a month on that, and that really helps pay the bills. So thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.